The history of Buddha. The birth and the early years. Indian history actually begins with the story of the Buddha Gautama's life, or to put it perhaps more exactly, that is the point where history as record replaces archaeology and legend. For the documents of the Buddha's life and teaching, the earliest Indian documents to be accorded historical standing reveal a civilization already stable and highly developed, which can only have matured after a very long period indeed. Now the Buddha attained his complete enlightenment at Uruvala in the Ganges plain, which is called the Middle Country. As distances are reckoned in India, it was not very far from the immemorial holy city of Benares. His struggle to attain enlightenment had lasted 6 years, and he was then 35 years old. From that time onward he wandered from place to place in central India for the space of 45 years, constantly explaining the 4 noble truths that he had discovered. The final parinibbana took place, as it is now calculated in Europe, in the year 483 BC. The period through which he lived seems to have been outstandingly quiet, with governments well organized and a stable society, in marked contrast with what must have gone before and came after. 3 months from the time of the Buddha's parinibbana, his senior disciples who survived him summoned a council of 500 senior monks in order to agree upon the form in which the master's teaching should be handed down to posterity. Among these 500, all of whom had realized enlightenment, the elder Upali was the acknowledged authority on the rules of conduct for the Sangha or monastic order, which are called the Vinaya or discipline. In lay life a barber, he had gone forth into the life of homelessness along with the Buddha's cousin, Nanda, and others. He was appointed to recite before the council the rules of conduct together with the circumstances that caused them to be laid down. The main part of the coffer of the discipline was composed there from his recitation. When he had finished, the elder 3/4 Nanda was invited to recite the discourses. During the last 24 years of the Buddha's life, he had been the Buddha's personal attendant, and he was gifted with an extraordinary memory. Almost the whole of the collections of discourses in the coffer of discourses was composed from his recitation of them with their settings. The elder Upali began each account with the words Tena Samayina, the occasion was this, but the elder Nanda prefaced each discourse with an account of where and to whom it was spoken, beginning with the words Evami Sutta, thus I heard. This narrative of the Buddha's life is taken from those 2 coffers. How they survived to this day is a story to be given later on. But here, to begin with, is the account of the Buddha's last birth, told by himself and related afterwards at the council by the elder Nanda. The words were actually spoken in the Buddha's own language, now known as Pali. First voice. Thus I heard. On one occasion the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jita's Grove, and plus or minus Thapi superscript 1 IKA's park. Then a number of bhikkhus too were waiting in an assembly hall where they had met together on return from their alms round after their meal was over. Meanwhile it was being said among them, "It is wonderful, friends, it is marvelous how the Perfect One's power and might enable him to know of past Buddhas who attained the complete extinction of defilement, cut the tangle, broke the circle, ended the round, and surmounted all suffering. Such were those Blessed Ones' births, such their names, such their clans, such their virtue, such their concentration, such their understanding, such their abiding, such the manner of their deliverance. When this was said, the venerable Nanda told the bhikkhus, perfect ones are wonderful friends, and have wonderful qualities. Perfect ones are marvelous and have marvelous qualities. However, their talk meanwhile was left unfinished, for now it was already evening and the Blessed One, who had risen from retreat, came to the assembly hall and sat down on the seat made ready. Then he asked the bhikkhus, "Bhikkhus, for what talk are you gathered together here now? And what was your talk meanwhile that was left unfinished?" What the bhikkhus and the venerable Nanda had said was related, and they added, "Lord, this was our talk meanwhile that was left unfinished, for the Blessed One arrived." Then the Blessed One turned to the venerable Nanda. That being so, Nanda, explain the Perfect One's wonderful and marvelous qualities more fully. I heard and learned this, Lord, from the Blessed One's own lips. Mindful and fully aware, the Bodhisattva, the being dedicated to enlightenment, appeared in the heaven of the contented. And I remember that as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the blessed. 1. I heard and learned this, Lord, from the Blessed One's own lips. Mindful and fully aware, the Bodhisattva remained in the heaven of the contented. For the whole of that lifespan the Bodhisattva remained in the heaven of the contented. Mindful and fully aware, the Bodhisattva passed away from the heaven of the contented and descended into his mother's womb. When the Bodhisattva had passed away from the heaven of the contented and entered his mother's womb, a great measureless light surpassing the splendor of the gods appeared in the world with its deities, its Maras and its Brahma divinities, in this generation with its monks and Brahmins, with its princes and men. And even in those abysmal world interspaces of vacancy, gloom and utter darkness, where the moon and sun, powerful and mighty as they are, cannot make their light prevail, there too a great measureless light surpassing the splendor of the gods appeared, and the creatures born there perceived each other by that light, so it seems that other creatures have appeared here. And this 10,000-fold world system shook and quaked and trembled, and there too a great measureless light surpassing the splendor of the gods appeared. When the Bodhisattva had descended into his mother's womb, for deities came to guard him from the four quarters, so that no human or non-human beings or anyone at all should harm him or his mother. When the Bodhisattva had descended into his mother's womb, she became intrinsically pure, refraining by necessity from killing living beings, from taking what is not given, from unchastity, from false speech, and from indulgence in wine, liquor, and fermented brews. When the Bodhisattva had descended into his mother's womb, no thought of man associated with the 5 strands of sensual desires came to her at all, and she was inaccessible to any man with lustful mind. When the Bodhisattva had descended into his mother's womb, she at the same time possessed the 5 strands of sensual desires, and, being endowed and furnished with them, she was gratified in them. When the Bodhisattva had descended into his mother's womb, no kind of affliction arose in her, she was blissful in the absence of all bodily fatigue, as though a blue, yellow, red, white, or brown thread were strung through a fine beryl gem of purest water, eight-faceted and well-cut, so that a man with sound eyes, taking it in his hand, might review it thus: this is a fine beryl gem of purest water, eight-faceted and well-cut, and through it is strung a blue, yellow, red, white, or brown thread. So too the Bodhisattva's mother saw him within her womb with all his limbs, lacking no faculty. 7 days after the Bodhisattva was born, his mother died and was reborn in the heaven of the contented. Other women give birth after carrying the child in the womb for 9 or 10 months, but not so the Bodhisattva's mother. She gave birth to him after carrying him in her womb for exactly 10 months. Other women give birth seated or lying down, but not so the Bodhisattva's mother. She gave birth to him standing up. When the Bodhisattva came forth from his mother's womb, first deities received him, then human beings. When the Bodhisattva came forth from his mother's womb, he did not touch the earth. The 4 deities received him and set him before his mother, saying, "Rejoice! Queen, a son of great power has been born to you." When the Bodhisattva came forth from his mother's womb, just as if a gem were placed on Benares cloth, the gem would not smear the cloth or the cloth the gem. Why not? Because both are pure. So too the Bodhisattva came forth from his mother's womb unsullied, unsmeared by water or humors or blood or any sort of impurity, clean and unsullied. When the Bodhisattva came forth from his mother's womb too, jets of water appeared to pour from the sky, one cool and one warm, for bathing the Bodhisattva and his mother. As soon as the Bodhisattva was born, he stood firmly with his feet on the ground. Then he took 7 steps to the north, and with a white sunshade held over him, he surveyed each quarter. He uttered the words of the leader of the herd: "I am the highest in the world. I am the best in the world. I am the foremost in the world. This is the last birth. Now there is no more renewal of being in future lives." When the Bodhisattva came forth from his mother's womb, a great, measureless light surpassing the splendor of the gods appeared in the world with its deities, its Maras, and its Brahma divinities, in this generation, with its monks and Brahmins, with its princes and men, and even in those abysmal world interspaces of vacancy, gloom and utter darkness, where the moon and sun, powerful and mighty as they are, cannot make their light prevail. There too a great measureless light, surpassing the splendor of the gods, appeared, and the creatures born there perceived each other by that light. So it seems that other creatures have appeared here, and this 10,000-fold world system shook and quaked and trembled, and there too a great measureless light surpassing the splendor of the gods appeared. All these things I heard and learned from the Blessed One's own lips, and I remember them as wonderful and marvelous qualities of the Blessed One. That being so, Nanda, remember also this as a wonderful and marvelous quality of a perfect one. A perfect one's feelings of pleasure, pain, or equanimity are known to him as they arise, known to him as they are present, and known to him as they subside. His perceptions are known to him as they arise, known to him as they are present, and known to him as they subside. His thoughts are known to him as they arise, known to him as they are present, and known to him as they subside. And that also I remember, Lord, as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Blessed One. That is what the Venerable Nanda said. The Master approved. The Bhikkhus were satisfied, and they delighted in the Venerable Nanda's words. How a Brahman seer, a seer of the divine or priestly caste, foretold the coming enlightenment is told in a song. The sage Asita, in his daytime meditation, saw that the gods, those of the company of 30, were happy and gay, all brightly clad, waving flags. The while their ruler Sakka they were wildly cheering. Now when he saw the gods so happy and elated, respectfully he greeted them and asked them this: Why is the company of gods so joyful? Why have they brought out flags to brandish thus? There was no celebration such as this, even after the battle with the demons, wherein the gods won and the demons lost. What marvel have they heard that so delights them? See how they sing and shout and strum guitars, clapping their hands and dancing all about. O you that dwell on Meru's airy peaks, I beg you, leave me not in doubt, good sirs. At a Sakyan city in the land of Lumbin superscript 2, a being to be enlightened, a priceless jewel, is born in the world of men for welfare and weal. Because of that we are extravagantly gay. The unique being, the personality sublime, the Lord of all men and foremost among mankind, will turn the wheel in the grove of the ancient seers. With the roar of the lion, the monarch of all beasts. On hearing this, the sage in haste went to Suddhodana's abode. There he sat down. Where is the boy? He asked the Sakyans, show him to me. Now when the Sakyans showed the child to Asita, his color was as pure as beams of brilliant gold wrought in a crucible, shining and clear. The joy of rapture flooded Asita's heart on seeing the boy bright as a flame and pure, as the Lord of the stars heard riding in the sky, dazzling as the cloudless autumn sun, while gods in the heavenly vault held over him a many-ribbed sunshade with 1,000 circles, brandishing gold-stick chowries, though none saw the holders of the sunshade and the chowries. The sage with matted hair, called Kahasiri, 5. Seeing the boy, like a gold jewel upon brocade, with the white sunshade held above his head, received him full of joy and happiness. As soon as he received the Sakyan's Lord, the adept in construing marks and signs, exclaimed with ready confidence of heart, among the biped race he is unique. Then he remembered, seeing his own lot. In very sadness tears came to his eyes. The Sakyans saw him weeping, and they asked, will some misfortune then befall our prince? But to the anxious Sakyans he replied, "As I foresee, no harm will touch the boy. Nor is there any danger that awaits him. Be sure he is not of the second rank. For he will reach the summit of true knowledge. A seer of the peerless purity. Through pity for the many he will set the Dhamma wheel turning and spread his life of holiness. But little of my lifespan now remains, and I shall die meanwhile. I shall not hear the matchless hero teaching the good Dhamma. That saddens me, that loss distresses me. He that lived the holy life left the inner palace chamber, after he had filled the Sakyans with an all-abounding joy. To his sister's son he went, moved by feelings of compassion, telling him the peerless hero's future finding of the Dhamma. When news shall reach you that he is enlightened, and living out the Dhamma he has found, then go to him and ask about his teaching, and live with that blessed one the holy life. So N plus or minus Laka, who had laid up a store of merit, forewarned by one who wished him well, who had foreseen the being to come, attained to utter purity, waited with guarded senses, expecting the victor. On hearing that the noble victor had rolled the wheel, he went to him. He saw the Lord of all the seers, and trusted in him when he saw, fulfilling Asita's behest. He questioned then the perfect sage about the silentness supreme, though literature of a later date supplies many details. Of the early years, the Tipayaka itself has very little to say about them. There is, in fact, only reference to two incidents. Firstly, the reminiscence of the meditation under the rose-apple tree while the Bodhisattva's father was working, doing the ceremonial plowing at the opening of the sowing season, the commentary says, which we shall come to later, and secondly there is the account of the three considerations, which correspond to three of the messengers, the old, the sick and the dead, seen by the former Buddha Vipa superscript 2. I was delicate, most delicate, supremely delicate. Lily pools were made for me at my father's house solely for my benefit. Blue lily flowered in one, white lilies in another, red lilies in a third. I used no sandalwood that was not from Benares. My turban, tunic, lower garments and cloak were all made of Benares cloth. A white sunshade was held over me day and night so that no cold or heat or dust or grit or dew might inconvenience me. I had 3 palaces, one for the winter, one for the summer and one for the rains. In the rains palace I was entertained by minstrels, with no men among them. For the 4 months of the rains I never went down to the lower palace, though meals of broken rice with lentil soup are given to the servants and retainers in other people's houses. In my father's house white rice and meat was given to them. Whilst I had such power and good fortune, yet I thought, when an untaught ordinary man, who is subject to aging, not safe from aging, sees another who is aged, he is shocked, humiliated, and disgusted. For he forgets that he himself is no exception. But I too am subject to aging, not safe from aging, and so it cannot befit me to be shocked, humiliated, and disgusted on seeing another who is aged. When I considered this, the vanity of youth entirely left me. I thought, when an untaught ordinary man who is subject to sickness, not safe from sickness, sees another who is sick, he is shocked, humiliated, and disgusted, for he forgets that he himself is no exception. But I too am subject to sickness, not safe from sickness. And so it cannot befit me to be shocked, humiliated, and disgusted on seeing another who is sick. When I considered this, the vanity of health entirely left me. I thought, when an untaught ordinary man who is subject to death, not safe from death, sees another who is dead, he is shocked, humiliated, and disgusted, for he forgets that he himself is no exception. But I too am subject to death, not safe from death, and so it cannot befit me to be shocked, humiliated, and disgusted on seeing another who is dead. When I considered this, the vanity of life entirely left me. The struggle for enlightenment. The account of the renunciation given in the Piyakas is striking in its bare simplicity. The elaborate details of the later versions are absent in it, as they are in this oldest version of the birth and early years. Here is the account, which is drawn from several discourses delivered to various persons. First voice. Before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, being myself subject to birth, aging, ailment, death, sorrow, and defilement, I sought after what was also subject to these things. Then I thought, why, being myself subject to birth, aging, ailment, death, sorrow, and defilement, do I seek after what is also subject to these things? Suppose, being myself subject to these things, seeing danger in them, I sought after the unborn, unaging, unailing, deathless, sorrowless, undefiled supreme surcease of bondage, Nibna. Before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, I thought, house life is crowded and dusty, life gone forth is wide open. It is not easy, living in a household, to lead a holy life as utterly perfect and pure as a polished shell. Suppose I shaved off my hair and beard, put on the yellow robe, and went forth from the house life into homelessness? Later, while still young, a black-haired boy blessed with youth. In the first phase of life, I shaved off my hair and beard, though my mother and father wished otherwise and grieved with tearful faces. And I put on the yellow robe and went forth from the house life into homelessness. Now I will tell the going forth. How he, the mighty seer, went forth. How he was questioned and described. The reason for his going forth. The crowded life lived in a house exhales an atmosphere of dust. But life gone forth is open wide. He saw this, and he chose the going forth. By his so doing he refused all evil action of the body, rejected all wrong kinds of speech, and rectified his livelihood besides. He went to Rajagaha town, the castle of the Magadhans. There he the Buddha went for alms, with many a mark of excellence. King Bimbisra from within his palace saw him passing by, and when he saw the excellence of all the marks, "Look, sirs," he said, "how handsome is that man, how stately, how pure and perfect is his conduct, with downcast eyes and mindful looking, only a plough yoke's length before him. His is no lowly lineage. Send the royal messengers at once to follow up the path the bhikkhu takes." The messengers were sent at once, and followed closely in his wake. Now which way will the bhikkhu go? Where has he chosen his abode? He wanders on from house to house, guarding sense doors with real restraint, fully aware and mindfully. He soon has filled his begging bowl. His alms round is now done. The sage is setting out and leaves the town, taking the road to Pa-Ava. He must live on the hill of Pa-Ava. Now when he came to his abode, the messengers went up to him, though one of them turned back again, to give the king the answer to his question. The bhikkhu, sire, like a tiger, or like a bull, or like a lion, is seated in a mountain cave, upon the eastern slope of Pa-Ava. The warrior heard the runner's tale. Then summoning a coach of state, he drove in haste out of the town, out to the hill of Pa-Ava. He drove as far as he could go, and then descended from the coach. The little distance that remained, he went on foot, till he drew near the sage. The king sat down, and he exchanged greetings, and asked about his health. When this exchange of courtesy was done, the king then spoke to him these words: "You are quite young, a youth, a boy in the first phase of life. You have the good looks of a man, of high-born warrior noble stock, one fit to grace a first-rate army, to lead the troops of elephants. I offer you a fortune, take it. Your birth I ask you also, tell it. There is a prosperous country, sire, and vigorous, right up against the foothills of Himalaya, inhabited by Kosalans, whose race is named after the sun, whose lineage is Sakyan. But I have not gone forth to seek sense pleasures. I have gone out to strive, seeing danger in them, and seeing safe refuge from them in renouncing. That is my heart's desire." First voice. Now I went forth from the house life into homelessness, to seek what is good, one seeking the supreme state of sublime peace. Therefore, I went to Alara Kalama, and I said to him, "Friend Kalama, I want to lead the holy life in this Dhamma and discipline." When this was said, Ara Kalama told me, "The Venerable One may stay here. This teaching is such that in no long time a wise man can enter upon and dwell in it, himself realizing through direct knowledge what his own teacher knows." I soon learned the teaching. I claimed that as far as mere lip reciting and rehearsal of his teaching went I could speak with knowledge. an assurance, and that I knew and saw, and there were others who did likewise. I thought, it is not through mere faith alone that Alara Kalama declares his teaching, it is because he has entered upon and dwelt in it, himself realizing it through direct knowledge. It is certain that he dwells in this teaching, knowing and seeing. Then I went to Alara Kalama, and I said to him, Friend Kalama, how far do you declare to have entered upon this teaching yourself, realizing it through direct knowledge? When this was said, he declared the base consisting of nothingness. It occurred to me, it is not only Alara Kalama that has faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration and understanding, but I too have these faculties. Suppose I strove to realize the teaching that he declares to enter upon and dwell in, himself realizing it through direct knowledge. I soon succeeded. Then I went to Alara Kalama, and I said to him, Friend Kalama, is it thus far that you declare to have entered upon and dwelt in this teaching, yourself realizing it through direct knowledge? And he told me that it was. I too, friend, have thus far entered upon and dwelt in this teaching, myself realizing it through direct knowledge. We are fortunate, friend, we are indeed fortunate, to have found such a venerable one for our fellow in the holy life. So the teaching that I declare to have entered upon, myself realizing it through direct knowledge that you enter upon and dwell in, yourself realizing it through direct knowledge, and the teaching that you enter upon and dwell in, yourself realizing it through direct knowledge, that I declare to have entered upon, myself realizing it through direct knowledge. So you know the teaching that I know the teaching that you know. As I am, so are you, as you are, so am I. Come, friend, let us now lead this community together. Thus Alara Kalama, my teacher, placed me, his pupil, on an equal footing with himself, according me the highest honor. I thought, this teaching does not lead to dispassion, to fading of lust, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana, but only to the base consisting of nothingness. I was not satisfied with that teaching. I left it to pursue my search. Still in search of what is good, seeking the supreme state of sublime peace, I went to Uddaka Ramaputta, and I said to him, Friend, I want to lead the holy life in this Dhamma and discipline. His experience under the guidance of Uddaka Ramaputta is told in exactly the same words, except that he learnt from him the still higher attainment of the base consisting of neither perception nor non-perception, and that Uddaka Ramaputta offered him the sole leadership of that community. But the conclusion was the same. First voice. I thought, this teaching does not lead to dispassion, to fading of lust, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana, but only to the base consisting of neither perception nor non-perception. I was not satisfied with that teaching. I left it to pursue my search. Still in search of what is good, seeking the supreme state of sublime peace, I wandered by stages through the Magadhan country, and at length arrived at Senanigama near Uruvala. There I saw an agreeable plot of ground, a delightful grove, a clear flowing river with pleasant smooth banks, and nearby a village as alms resort. I thought, this will serve for the struggle of a clansman who seeks the struggle. Now before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, I thought, remote jungle thicket abodes in the forest are hard to endure, seclusion is hard to achieve, isolation is hard to enjoy. One would think the jungles must rob a bhikkhu of his mind if he has no concentration. I thought, suppose some monk or Brahmin is unpurified in bodily, verbal or mental conduct, or in his livelihood, is covetous, and keenly sensitive to lust for sensual desires, or malevolent with thoughts of hate, or a prey to lethargy and drowsiness, or agitated and uncommon mind, or doubting and uncertain, is given to self-praise, and denigrating others, is subject to fright and horror, desires gain, honor and renown, is idle and wanting in energy, forgetful and not fully aware, unconcentrated and confused in mind, devoid of understanding, and driveling when some such monk or Brahmin resorts to a remote jungle thicket abode in the forest, then owing to those faults he evokes unwholesome too fear and dread. But I do not resort to a remote jungle thicket abode in the forest as one of those. I have none of those defects. I resort to a remote jungle thicket abode in the forest as one of the noble ones, who are free from these defects. Seeing in myself this freedom from such defects, I find great solace in living in the forest. I thought, but there are the specially holy nights of the half moons of the 14th and 15th, and the quarter moon of the 8th. Suppose I spent those nights in such awe-inspiring abodes as orchard shrines, woodland shrines and tree shrines, which make the hair stand up. Perhaps I should encounter that fear and dread. And later, on such specially holy nights as the half-moons of the 14th and 15th, and the quarter moon of the 8th, I dwelt in such awe-inspiring abodes as orchard shrines, woodland shrines, and tree shrines, which make the hair stand up. And while I dwelt there, a deer would approach me, or a peacock would knock off a branch, or the wind would rustle the leaves. Then I thought, surely this is the fear and dread coming. I thought, why do I dwell in constant expectation of the fear and dread? Why not subdue that fear and dread while maintaining the posture I am in when it comes to me? And while I walked, the fear and dread came upon me, but I neither stood nor sat nor lay down till I had subdued that fear and dread. While I stood, the fear and dread came upon me, but I neither walked nor sat nor lay down till I had subdued that fear and dread. While I sat, the fear and dread came upon me, but I neither walked nor stood nor lay down till I had subdued that fear and dread. While lay, the fear and dread came upon me, but I neither walked nor stood nor sat till I had subdued that fear and dread. Now 3 similes occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. Suppose there were a wet, sappy piece of wood lying in water, and a man came with an upper fire stick, thinking, I shall light a fire, I shall produce heat. How do you conceive this? Would the man light a fire and produce heat by taking the upper fire stick and rubbing the wet, sappy piece of wood lying in water with it? No, Lord. Why not? Because it is a wet, sappy piece of wood, and besides it is lying in water. So the man would reap weariness and disappointment. So too, while a monk or Brahman lives still bodily and mentally not withdrawn from sensual desires, and while his lust, affection, passion, thirst and fever for sensual desires are still not quite abandoned and quieted within him, then, whether the good monk or Brahman feels painful, racking, piercing feelings imposed by striving, or whether he does not, he is in either case incapable of knowledge and vision and suprême en l'actement. This was the first simile that occurred to me. Spontaneously, never heard before. Again, suppose there were a wet, sappy piece of wood lying on dry land far from water, and a man came with an upper fire stick, thinking, I shall light a fire, I shall produce heat. How do you conceive this? Would the man light a fire and produce heat? By taking the upper fire stick and rubbing the wet, sappy piece of wood lying on dry land far from water with it. No, Lord. Why not? Because it is a wet, sappy piece of wood, though it is lying on dry land far from water. So the man would reap weariness and disappointment. So too, while a monk or Brahman lives still only bodily withdrawn from sensual desires, and while his lust, affection, passion, thirst and fever for sensual desires are not quite abandoned and quieted within him, then, whether the good monk or Brahman feels painful, racking, piercing feelings imposed by striving, or whether he does not, he is in either case incapable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. This was the second simile that occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. Again, suppose there were a dry, sapless piece of wood lying on dry land far from water, and a man came with an upper fire stick, thinking, I shall light a fire, I shall produce heat. How do you conceive this? Would the man light a fire and produce heat by taking the upper fire stick and rubbing the dry, sapless piece of wood lying on dry land far from water with it? Yes, Lord. Why so? Because it is a dry, sapless piece of wood, and besides, it is lying on dry land far from water. So too, while a monk or Brahman lives both bodily and mentally withdrawn from sensual desires, and while his lust, affection, passion, thirst and fever for sensual desires are quite abandoned and quieted within him, then, whether the good monk or Brahman feels painful, racking, piercing feelings imposed by striving, or whether he does not, he is in either case capable of knowledge and vision and suprême en l'actement. This was the third simile that occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. I thought, suppose with my teeth clenched and my tongue pressed against the roof of my mouth, I beat down, constrain and crush my mind with my mind. Then, as a strong man might seize a weaker by the head or shoulders and beat him down, constrain him, and crush him, so with my teeth clenched and my tongue pressed against the roof of my mouth, I beat down, constrained and crushed my mind with my mind. Sweat ran from my armpits while I did so, though tireless energy was aroused in me, and unremitting mindfulness established, yet my body was overwrought and uncalm. because I was exhausted by the painful effort. But such painful feelings as arose in me gained no power over my mind. I thought, suppose I practice the meditation that is without breathing. I stopped the in-breaths and out-breaths in my mouth and nose. When I did so, there was a loud sound of winds coming from my ear holes, as there is a loud sound when a smith's bellows are blown. I stopped the in-breaths and out-breaths in my mouth and nose and ears. When I did so, violent winds racked my head, as if a strong man were splitting my head open with a sharp sword. And then there were violent pains in my head, as if a strong man were tightening a tough leather strap round my head, as a headband. And then violent winds carved up my belly, as a clever butcher or his apprentice carves up an ox's belly with a sharp knife. And then there was a violent burning in my belly, as if two strong men had seized a weaker man by both arms and were roasting him over a pit of live coals. And each time, though tireless energy was aroused in me and unremitting mindfulness established, yet my body was overwrought and uncalm because I was exhausted by the painful effort. But such painful feeling as arose in me gained no power over my mind. Now when deities saw me, they said, "The monk Gautama is dead." Other deities said, "The monk Gautama is not dead, he is dying." Other deities said, "The monk Gautama is neither dead nor dying, the monk Gautama is an arahant, a saint, for such is the way of saints." I thought, suppose I entirely cut off food? Then deities came to me and said, "Good sir, do not entirely cut off food. If you do so, we shall inject divine food into your pores and you will live on that." Thought, if I claim to be completely fasting, and these deities inject divine food into my pores and I live on that, then I shall be lying. Dismissed them, saying there is no need. I thought, suppose I take very little food, say, a handful each time, whether it is bean soup or lentil soup or pea soup. I did so. And as I did so, my body reached a state of extreme emaciation, my limbs became like the jointed segments of vine stems or bamboo stems because of eating so little. My backside became like a camel's hoof, the projections on my spine stood forth like corded beads, my ribs jutted out as gaunt as the crazy rafters of an old roofless barn. The gleam of my eyes sunk far down in their sockets looked like the gleam of water sunk far down in a deep well, my scalp shriveled and withered as a green gourd shrivels and withers in the wind and sun. If I touched my belly skin, I encountered my backbone too, and if I touched my backbone, I encountered my belly skin too, for my belly skin cleaved to my backbone. If I made water or evacuated my bowels, I fell over on my face there. If I tried to ease my body by rubbing my limbs with my hands, the hair, rotted at its roots, fell away from my body as I rubbed, because of eating so little. When human beings saw me now, they said, "The monk Gautama is a black man." Other human beings said, "The monk Gautama is not a black man, he is a brown man." Other human beings said, "Better I die in battle now than choose to live on in defeat." There are ascetics and Brahmins that have surrendered here, and they are seen no more, they do not know the paths the pilgrim travels by. So, seeing Mara's squadrons now arrayed all round, with elephants, I sally forth to fight, that I may not be driven from my post. Your serried squadrons, which the world with all its gods cannot defeat, I shall now break with understanding, as with a stone a raw clay pot. I thought, whenever a monk or Brahmin has felt in the past or will feel in the future, or feels now painful, racking, piercing feeling due to striving, it can equal this but not exceed it. But by this grueling penance I have attained no distinction higher than the human state, worthy of the noble one's knowledge and vision. Might there be another way to enlightenment? I thought of a time when my Sakyan father was working and I was sitting in the cool shade of a rose-apple tree, quite secluded from sensual desires, secluded from unwholesome things I had entered upon, and abode in the first meditation, which is accompanied by thinking and exploring, with happiness and pleasure born of seclusion. Thought, might that be the way to enlightenment? Then, following up that memory, there came the recognition that this was the way to enlightenment. Then I thought, why am I afraid of such pleasure? It is pleasure. That has nothing to do with sensual desires and unwholesome things. Then I thought, I am not afraid of such pleasure, for it has nothing to do with sensual desires and unwholesome things. I thought, it is not possible to attain that pleasure with a body so excessively emaciated. Suppose I ate some solid food, some boiled rice and bread. 4. Now at that time 5 bhikkhus were waiting on me, thinking, if the monk Gautama achieves something, he will tell us. As soon as I ate the solid food, the boiled rice and bread, the 5 bhikkhus were disgusted and left me, thinking, the monk Gautama has become self-indulgent. He has given up the struggle and reverted to luxury. 5. Dreams now appeared to the Bodhisattva. It was the night before his attainment of enlightenment, and the dreams were a premonition that he was about to attain his goal. Just before the perfect one, accomplished and fully enlightened, attained enlightenment, 5 momentous dreams appeared to him. What 5? While he was still only an unenlightened Bodhisattva, the great earth was his couch, Himalaya, king of mountains, was his pillow, his left hand lay in the Eastern Ocean. His right hand lay in the Western Ocean, his feet lay in the Southern Ocean. This was the first dream that appeared to him, and it foretold his discovery of the supreme full enlightenment. While he was still only an unenlightened Bodhisattva, a creeper grew up out of his navel and stood touching the clouds. This was the second dream that appeared to him, and it foretold his discovery of the Noble Eightfold Path. While he was still only an unenlightened Bodhisattva, white grubs with black heads crawled from his feet to his knees and covered them. This was the third dream that appeared to him, and it foretold that many white-clothed laymen would go for refuge to the perfect one during his life, while he was only an unenlightened Bodhisattva. 4 birds of different colors came from the 4 quarters, and as They alighted at his feet, they all became white. This was the fourth dream that appeared to him, and it foretold that the four castes, the warrior nobles, the Brahmin priests, the burgesses, and the plebeians, would realize the supreme deliverance when the Dhamma and the discipline had been proclaimed by the Perfect One. While he was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, he walked upon a huge mountain of dirt without being fouled by the dirt. This was the fifth dream that appeared to him, and it foretold that although the Perfect One would obtain the requisites of robes, alms, food, abode, and medicine, yet he would use them without greed or delusion or clinging, perceiving their dangers and understanding their purpose. The enlightenment itself is described in a number of discourses, and from several different angles, as though one were to describe a tree from above, from below and from various sides, or a journey by land, by water and by air. 5. There is the description of it as the attainment of the three true knowledges told as following upon the development of meditation. Then there are descriptions of it in terms of the discovery of the structure of conditionality in the impermanent process of being, and in terms of the search for the undeceiving interpretation, the true scale of value, in the problematic world of ideas, acts and things, probabilities and certainties. Here is the description in terms of meditation leading up to the discovery of the Four Noble Truths. Now when I had eaten solid food and had regained strength, then quite secluded from sensual desires, secluded from unwholesome states, I entered upon and abode in the first meditation, which is accompanied by thinking and exploring, with happiness and pleasure born of seclusion. But I allowed no such pleasant feeling as arose in me to gain power over my mind. With the stilling of thinking and exploring, I entered upon and abode in the second meditation, which has internal confidence and singleness of mind. Without thinking and exploring, with happiness and pleasure born of concentration. But I allowed no such pleasant feeling as arose in me to gain power over my mind. With the fading as well of happiness, I abode in onlooking equanimity, mindful and fully aware, still feeling pleasure with the body. I entered upon and abode in the third meditation, referring to which the noble ones announce, he has a pleasant abiding who looks on with equanimity and is mindful. But I allowed no such pleasant feeling as arose in me to gain power over my mind. With the abandoning of bodily pleasure and pain, and with the previous disappearance of mental joy and grief, I entered upon and abode in the fourth meditation, which has neither pain nor pleasure, and the purity of whose mindfulness is due to onlooking equanimity. But I allowed no such pleasure as arose in me to gain power over my mind. When my concentrated mind was thus purified, bright, unblemished and rid of imperfection, when it had become malleable, wieldy, steady and attained to imperturbability, I inclined my mind to the knowledge of recollection of past lives. Recollected my manifold past lives, that is to say 1 birth, 2, 3, 4, 5 births, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 births, 100 births, 1,000 births, 100,000 births, many ages of world contraction, many ages of world expansion, many ages of world contraction and expansion. I was there so named of Such a race, with such an appearance, such food, such experience. Of pleasure and pain, such a life term, and passing away thence I reappeared elsewhere, and there too I was so named of such a race, with such an appearance, such experience of pleasure and pain, such a life term, passing away thence I reappeared here, thus with details and particulars I recollected my manifold past life. This was the first true knowledge attained by me in the first watch of the night. Ignorance was banished and true knowledge arose, darkness was banished, and light arose, as happens in one who is diligent, ardent, and self-controlled. Unenlightened Bodhisattva, I thought, this world has fallen into a slough, for it is born, ages and dies, it passes away and reappears, and yet it knows no escape from this suffering. When will an escape from this suffering be described? I thought, what is there when aging and death come to be? What is their necessary condition? Then with ordered attention I came to understand, birth is there when aging and death come to be, birth is a necessary condition for them. I thought, what is there when birth comes to be? What is its necessary condition? Then with ordered attention I came to understand, being is there when birth comes to be, being is a necessary condition for that. I thought, what is there when being comes to be? What is its necessary condition? Then with ordered attention I came to understand, clinging is there when being comes to be, clinging is a necessary condition for that. I thought, what is there when the sixfold base comes to be? What is its necessary condition? Then with ordered attention I came to understand, name and form is there when the sixfold base comes to be, name and form is a necessary condition for that. I thought, what is there when name and form comes to be? What is its necessary condition? Then with ordered attention I came to understand, consciousness is there when name and form comes to be, consciousness is a necessary condition for that. I thought, what is there when consciousness comes to be? What is its necessary condition? Then with ordered attention I came to understand, name and form is there when consciousness comes to be, name and form is a necessary condition for that. I thought, this consciousness turns back upon itself, it does not extend beyond name and form. And this is how it happens whether one is being born, aging or dying, passing away or reappearing. That is to say, it is with name and form as condition that consciousness comes to be, with consciousness as condition, name and form, with name and form as condition, the sixfold base for contact, with the sixfold base as condition contact, with contact as condition feeling, with feeling as condition craving, with craving as condition clinging, with clinging as condition being, with being as condition birth, with birth as condition, aging and death come to be, and also sorrow and lamentation, pain, grief and despair, that is how there is an origin to this whole aggregate mass of suffering. The origin, such was the insight, the knowledge, the understanding, the vision, the light that arose in me about things not heard before. I thought, what is not there when no aging and death come to be? with the cessation of what is their cessation of aging and death. Then with ordered attention I came to understand, when there is no birth, no aging and death come to be, with cessation of birth there is cessation of aging and death. With cessation of what is their cessation of consciousness. Then with ordered attention I came to understand, when there is no name and form no consciousness comes to be, with cessation of name and form. There is cessation of consciousness. I thought, this is the path to enlightenment that I have now reached, that is to say, with cessation of name and form there is cessation of consciousness, with cessation of consciousness, cessation of name and form, with cessation of name and form, cessation of the sixfold base, with cessation of the sixfold base, cessation of contact. With cessation of contact, cessation of feeling, with cessation of feeling. Cessation of craving, with cessation of craving, cessation of clinging. With cessation of clinging, cessation of being, with cessation of being, cessation of birth, with cessation of birth, aging and death. Cease, and also sorrow and lamentation, pain, grief and despair, that is how there is a cessation to this whole aggregate mass of suffering. The cessation, such was the insight, the knowledge, the understanding, the vision, the light, that arose in me about things not heard before. Suppose a man wandering in a forest wilderness found an ancient path, an ancient trail, traveled by men of old, and he followed it up, and by doing so he discovered an ancient city, an ancient royal capital, where men of old had lived, with parks and groves and lakes, walled round and beautiful to see. So I too found the ancient path, the ancient trail, traveled by the fully enlightened ones of old. And what was that ancient path, that ancient trail? It was this noble eightfold path, that is to say, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. I followed it up. By doing so I directly knew aging and death, their origin, their cessation, and the way leading to their cessation. Directly knew birth, its origin, its cessation, and the way leading to its cessation. I directly knew being, clinging, craving, feeling, contact, the sixfold base, name and form, consciousness. I directly knew formations, their origin, their cessation, and the way leading to their cessation. Now finally here is the description in terms of the right judgment of the world of conditioned acts and ideas, classified in this discourse into the 5 aggregates, within which all conditioned experience, when analyzed, can be classified. Before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, I thought, in the case of material form, of feeling, of pleasure, pain, or neither, of perception, of formations, of consciousness, what is the gratification, what the danger, what the escape. Then I thought, in the case of each, the bodily pleasure and mental joy that arise in dependence on these things, the 5 aggregates, are the gratification, the fact that these things are all impermanent, painful and subject to change, is the danger, the disciplining and abandoning of desire and lust for them is the escape. As long as I did not know by direct knowledge, as it actually is, that such was the gratification, such the danger, and such the escape. In the case of these 5 aggregates affected by clinging, so long did I make no claim to have discovered the enlightenment that is supreme. In the world with its deities, its Maras and its Brahm plus or minus divinities, in this generation with its monks and Brahmins, with its princes and men. But as soon as I knew by direct knowledge, as it actually is, that such is the gratification, such the danger, and such the escape in the case of these 5 aggregates affected by clinging, then I claimed to have discovered the enlightenment that is supreme in the world with its deities, its Maras and its Brahm plus or minus divinities, in this generation with its monks and Brahmins, with its princes and men. Defilement, seeing danger in what is subject to those things and seeking the unborn, unaging, unnailing, deathless, sorrowless, undefiled. Supreme surcease of bondage, nibbana, I attained it. The knowledge and vision arose in me, my deliverance is unassailable, this is my last birth, there is now no renewal of being. Enlightenment has now been gained. And tradition has it that the first words that came to the Buddha, now no longer the Bodhisattva, were these: